Aloha, and welcome back to Leaving the Church to Find God, your safe space for exploring faith beyond traditional walls. I'm your host, Melissa, and whether you grew up in the evangelical church like I did, or any other system while seeking answers, you're in the right place. This podcast isn't about judgment or attacking institutions. It's about honest conversations, diverse spiritual paths, and celebrating the unique journeys that we all take in search of meaning. We've all experienced indoctrination in some form, and here we explore how it shapes our understanding of ourselves and the divine. Each week, we'll dive into thought-provoking topics, share inspiring stories from guests and listeners like you, and offer tools and insights for navigating your own deconstruction journey. Remember, leaving the church doesn't mean leaving your faith. It's about finding your own authentic connection to something greater. So buckle up, embrace the open dialogue, and join me as we explore what it means to move beyond confines and discover the deeper personal connection to the divine that exists within us all. Aloha, Marla. Welcome to the podcast. Full transparency, we did this before, guys, but it didn't work the first time, so here we are again. Thank you for coming back, Marla.
You're welcome.
It's nice to have you here. So, just to get started, we will go with your leaving the church story. Tell us all about it.
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, I'll start with my going to church story, which was began in 1975, right after I was born. And I went to church 3 times a week, every Wednesday evening, Sunday morning, and Sunday evening. For years and years and years and years of my life. And it wasn't until, well, the last time I went to church, I've visited a couple churches since then, mostly to see friends preach or something, but I haven't been to church since May of 2017. And we can get into this more, all of it, as we go. But basically, there's a lot of quote unquote deconstructing that happened. I started waking up to some things. It started with, I'm looking back through journals now, so I'm not exactly sure when it started, but in around 2008, 2009, I read a book called The Hole in Our Gospel by Richard Stearns and started thinking more about poverty and how he says that if the good news of the gospel isn't good news to an AIDS orphan in Uganda, then can it really be good news? And to me, good news was Jesus died for your sins. You ask him into your heart, he forgives you, and you get to go to heaven instead of hell, which is what you deserve. But that speaks not one single bit to the hell that your life could be on earth if you were born in the wrong place. By wrong place, I mean somewhere where you don't have access to food and water, and you're susceptible to disease and all of that, which is what it's like for the majority of the world. So I started waking up to that, and then I started attending a church, helped plant a church actually that was a multi-ethnic church, and that I started waking up to white supremacy and racism. And then from there, it was queer issues and are gay people really going to hell and all of that. And then speaking of hell, started questioning, do I really believe in hell? Why am I following a God who says that we have free will, but if you don't choose him and his specific path, then you will burn forever and ever and ever? How does that fit with a loving God? So all of those things kind of conspired together, and then had some events happen. We moved to Cambodia in January 2015 and got fired from an organization for losing confidence in our director, which is kind of a funny thing to get fired for. Because if you lose confidence in someone, you usually have a reason, and that reason was legit, and that reason was not resolved, but we were the ones that got fired for losing confidence. And then it happened again at a church, and they didn't use that same wording, lose confidence in your director, but we did. We lost confidence in our pastor because of the spiritual abuse that we saw. So then that was the end of church, and we moved back to the States in March of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And then my husband left in September of 2020. And I found out 4 months later that he'd been cheating on me for much of the time that we lived in Cambodia. So it just kept adding layers and layers and layers. But when people want to say something like, "Oh, so you left church because of what your husband did?" Oh no, that didn't. I didn't know what my husband was doing. Or you left church because you were hurt. No, that wasn't actually it either. It was because people I knew and loved were being hurt. So, yeah. And now it's 2024. And yeah, so that's a big chunk of my leaving church story.
Right. So I want to go back to this, like, losing confidence in the director situation. Like, if you really like break down those words and what that's saying, it's very cult-like, like,
yes.
you're not allowed to question this. If you lose confidence in your leader, like, the leader isn't questioned for why are people losing confidence, but like, you're questioned for losing the confidence, which is just very clearly like a manipulation tactic. I haven't heard it phrased that way, and that just was like blaring at me, just like, wow.
Yeah, it really hurt at the time, but I took a lot of notes and I wrote it all down, and we had conversations with other people, and it definitely has, over the years, it's just become, it's still not great. It doesn't cause me pain when I think about it now, but that whole idea of, like, I could show people the email that is exactly, that's the wording. Like, there was never any accusation against us at all, except for that. Like, you lost confidence, because they couldn't, there was nothing. It wouldn't serve them well to make up something that didn't happen.
Right.
So they didn't. They told the absolute truth. We lost confidence in our director. And yeah, very, very cult-like. And the board meeting, we had a meeting with the board to plead our case. And I was just on fire, ready for this board meeting, because we were right. Like, I just was so, speaking of confidence, I had very much confidence that we had, like, they had nothing to stand on, and we did. Well, what I didn't realize was that the board was made up of the director's brother and her close friend.
Wow.
So there goes the cult part, where even if you are fine, and they tried to get us to resign during this call. They wanted us to resign. And I said, absolutely not. You will have to say the words, "You are fired," which they did do. Then they wanted us to go through like 6 months of, I forget what it even was, like counseling or some kind of thing. And I was like, so counseling for me to what? Then have confidence in the thing that you that you did. And then we had another meeting. So this is all Christian people. It's not a church, but this is an organization. We had another meeting with someone who was on the missions board, and he actually took our side. And when we left and we were still over there in Cambodia, he and his wife for the next 2 years sent us $200 a month as like personal supporters, sponsors, because he believed in us, but didn't want to ruffle the feathers. It was just, it's like a big old thing, like a cult / business / and I personally do not want anything to do with missions, with parachurch organizations. I'm sure there are some good ones, but it just, we definitely got burned there. So that wasn't the reason that we quit the church, and we went on to work for another church. And then same thing happened, where we pointed out some things that we saw the pastor doing, taking advantage of the Cambodian people. He was from a country in Europe, and he did not like that. And so sat us down, and then he wanted us, same thing, wanted us to resign, but not tell anyone why. Didn't want us to tell our own kids who were also volunteering on this thing. He said, "I don't want you to tell them what happened." And I laughed in his face. I was like, "You're kidding, right?" Like, I'm not going to tell my children why I just resigned from this ministry outreach to poor people in Cambodia. Anyway, I feel like we're getting a little bit off track. But yeah, there's been a lot that's that's happened. But what I was starting to say was, even those two situations in a country where I went to go share the love of God, that really isn't a huge part of my deconstruction journey, because I was already unraveling all of these beliefs that I had. So that would have happened regardless whether or not I.
Of the deconstruction.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All so culty. It's just just nuts. And talking about the church counseling, like one thing I personally witnessed, and I'm not gonna say, I can't speak for everyone, but church counseling supersedes therapy. Like there's no anything about mental health, and anyone who I've known that has used church counseling, it has only encouraged them to stay in toxic and abusive situations. So
Right, because they're part of the cult also.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So counseling is not counseling, and then the real counseling, like seeing a trauma-informed therapist, is discouraged. Like you're like demon possessed, not you have mental health issues.
I had a friend years ago, this is before I even deconstructed, and she was excommunicated from the church that I grew up in because she went to a therapist.
Wow.
And they said that's not allowed. And I don't know the whole situation, but they told her there's only one kind of counseling, nouthetic or whatever it's called, the biblical counseling, where they only use what's like words from the Bible to counsel you, it's very, very sad and very laughable that you could using the Bible as an instruction manual is just beyond. It's so hypocritical for people to say that they do that when they do not do it for so many things. Like, you buy a house, you buy a car, you do this, you do your job. Do you only use the Bible as your instruction manual? No. You live in the 21st century in the United States of America, and nowhere did the Bible claim that this will be all that you need to get you through whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Well, and it's, really mythology. It's like thousands of year old like mythology that has no, I mean, there are some, of course, like some, there's a little value in there, when you get into like Jesus, there's some value there, in my opinion, although I don't go to the Bible for that, because I feel like as a whole, it's just not relevant to me. But, it's just a mythology basically that we're, people are still basing our entire society on, which is terrifying.
It's about power. I mean, if you can get people to believe that they have to follow this Bible and specifically follow your interpretation of that Bible, because that's where people get screwed over, is they don't realize that even if they're told to take the Bible literally, they are basing their literal interpretation off of what a pastor has said the Bible literally means. And there's a way that you can get around everything. And I think Trump being elected years ago now is an example of the ways that Christians will believe pretty much anything and twist anything as long as it fits what they want it to fit. And that's what people have been doing with the Bible for a really, really long time. And anything that doesn't fit, you can just explain away with other things like God's ways are higher than our ways, or whatever you want to do, because the Bible doesn't fit. The Bible does contradict itself. But you can, like I had someone who disowned me, wrote me a 12-page letter and used all this scripture. Most of it was words of Paul. And someone else in my family was saying, I'd like to write back to him. And I'm trying to figure out if I should refute everything he said of Paul's with all the other books of the Bible, or if I should just use Paul's words to refute what he said that Paul said, because you can also do that. You can play that game. I can play the game where you tell me why I'm a heretic based on what Paul said in these letters to churches, and I will tell you why I'm fine and not a heretic based on what Paul said to another church, or the same exact church, maybe the same exact paragraph.
Yeah, literally.
So it's a mess. I mean, I have a lot of friends still who are Christians. I have friends who are pastors. I have friends who use the Bible and love the Bible. But I don't believe I have many friends left in my life who believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible and are sending my gay friends to hell, etc. Those are those people in my life. If they are in my life, it might be because they're related to me and they haven't disowned me, so I haven't disowned them. But it's
mutual, not disowning yet.
Yeah. I haven't disowned. I mean, I haven't technically disowned anyone. But if people's beliefs are harming other people, then there's not really space in my heart and life for a friendship and a relationship with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Going back to this like cult tactics, it's one thing I've been realizing recently because, you know, there was, of course, in the last election cycle, with my family being from the South, there was a lot of separation. Like my own mother didn't speak to me for 8 months because I wouldn't accept the propaganda. And, you know, I at first was feeling really angry at them about that, but then realizing like because of the way that we were raised, because this has been like manipulated and we've been brainwashed into this like cult society, I have found myself I mean, now I'm in a much different place, but especially for the first several years leaving the church, very susceptible to cults. Like I totally could have gotten sucked into a cult like really easily because that way of moving and that way of structuring and thinking is what we've always known. It makes sense. So with this whole Trump cult situation, I've kind of this election cycle been able to step back and look at it as more seeing, at least in the people that I know and love, as like they're being manipulated by a cult. And, you know, I'm sure you feel this way, like when they come out of it, if they come out of it, they will be welcomed with open arms. I'm not going to get thrown into it by any means, but there's always a space of openness of like, yeah, we're all victims of this. So, you know, there's space for that too. Because I was one of them. I was completely bought in, you know, I completely bought into it for so long that, yeah, it's easy to be manipulated when that's all you've ever known. you know?
I've been reading, I don't read a ton of deconstruction stuff these days, but I did buy the book Exvangelicals by Sarah McCammon, I think her name is. And I'm reading that right now because Christine Kobes-Dumais, who wrote Jesus and John Wayne, a book I loved, she recommended it, endorsed it. And it's very interesting to read back and see all the people who I never knew, who lived in different states, different places, who had the same kind of belief system, and to see when it was, like what it was that them see the light, or what started waking them up, or when did they start having doubts or questions. And that's, it's fascinating to me. So when you talk about if people leave the Trump cult, you would welcome them back. I've had some people in my life, or even Facebook friends, who in 2020 and the years after that would send me a message and say, I unfriended you in 2016 when you were talking about racism. And it was after George Floyd's murder. And then they say, I understand. Could we be friends again? Yes, welcome them back. I have yet, to my knowledge, known of someone who was on the Trump train and is still on there that is getting off. I'm sure people are getting off, but I feel like a lot of people are just doubling down.
Yeah.
Where it gets to the point where if, like, my parents will be voting for Trump this year, and it's like, what else can I say? Because at this point, what they will probably argue, and we don't talk about this anymore, and I'll see them next week, but I only see them a couple times a year. At this point, you can't appeal to them with Trump lies, or Trump is immoral, or Trump's not really pro-life, he's actually pro-choice, Trump doesn't care about the Bible, he just pretends he does, like all of those things, because then they'll just take it to, well, he's just a means to an end. We need conservative Supreme Court justices, or we need to save babies from abortion, or we need, like, they'll just go some other way and say, I'm not saying it's great that he does all these things, even though they lift him up and adore him. Not my parents say, but other people. And there's just really no way. I don't argue with Trump supporters anymore. There's no way in. There's no way, no chink in their armor. Like, you can't do any kind of thing. It's a hopeless cause. They just have to, at some point, say, I'm not going to be complicit in this evil. And I was driving around with my daughter yesterday, and we saw these Trump 2024 signs, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, right, I do. I live in South Carolina. It doesn't matter what state you live in. I mean, you're going to see these signs everywhere. But
significantly fewer here in Hawaii, I'll say that.
Yeah, I don't. I sometimes forget, because I'm in a neighborhood that's pretty quiet, pretty diverse, and there aren't even any signs up anywhere right now. But then I go out and see these, and I'm like, oh yeah, there are people that are just gung ho. I don't even know. It's I can't believe we're doing this all over again. And here we are, 2024. Here we go again.
I kind of dissociate. I'm like, no, I just can't believe it. But I remember saying that the first time. So, yeah, it's interesting. I have definitely had people refriend me that I didn't realize they had unfriended me because I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. During the whole thing, until they were friend requesting me again. And I'm like, we're cousins. I'm pretty sure we were friends on here before.
This happened, yeah.
But fortunately, I have been able to see some people like pull away from it, and they're just not voting instead of voting for Trump. They still wouldn't dare vote for a Democrat, but they're just abstaining from voting. So I have seen a little bit of pull away from some people in my family. Fortunately, after the last election, one of my aunts, was like, I was on a ban. Election and that they're just staying quiet until the time comes. Just pray. I will pray for that. Yeah. Here's hoping. I mean, there's so many warning signs of what is to come if this is allowed to happen. And I'm just hoping that we're never in a position of looking back where everybody's like, oh, well, I didn't see it coming, because this is it. It's coming. Like, you can see what they're doing. Christian nationalism is scary for all of us. It's not, even if you're a Christian, it's not what you want, I promise. They're just feeding you what you want to hear. It's not what you want. But it's kind of terrifying, the whole thing. And speaking of Christian nationalism, let's talk about your time in Uganda and being a missionary.
It's actually Cambodia.
Cambodia.
I used a Uganda example earlier. So we there was, like, on your typical week-long missions trip where a bunch of white people go over to a developing, save them. And at first, my ex-husband, my husband at the time, didn't want to go. And looking back now, it's funny because he said to me, we watched this promotional video in church about, we have this orphan home that we sponsor and we could go over there, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you're going to pay $2,500 for a bunch of white people to go over and push brown kids in swings. Like, I don't think that's really a great use of your money. And so I just prayed really hard that God would change his heart. And then God did change his heart, or however that works. And so we went. And then decided after that we wanted to go back, and the girls, our daughters, we have 3 daughters, said, don't go back without us. So we started raising money to go back for another time and take them with us. My husband had a heart attack in the meantime at age 34, almost died. And then 6 weeks later, we got on a plane and went to Cambodia for 5 weeks. This is the end of 2011, beginning of 2012. came back from there and decided we were going to move to Cambodia. Again, my husband felt like God spoke to him while we were there, that we were supposed to move there. But then when we came back to the States, he started having anxiety and panic attacks, like a post-traumatic stress thing after his heart attack, lost his job, we lost our house, blah, blah, blah. 3 years later, we moved to Cambodia in 2015. And we started out as people who just wanted to help and love people and tell them about Jesus. And we deconstructed while we were over there. And of course, he was cheating for most of the time. And ironically or not ironically, after the cheating came to light, he would just overpost on Facebook about God and all of this stuff. And someone told me, a Cambodian friend told me that he reminded him of in Cambodia, if you mess up your life, then you can shave your head, go be a monk, and do penance, basically, so that you can earn your way back into the good graces of your family. And he said it kind of felt like that's what he was doing, he was taking this posture of this humble monk who loves God so much, blah, 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 to try to get people to like him again or whatever. So we were there. We did do a lot of humanitarian work that I am still glad that we did. I started an organization called Bamboo Libraries. We built libraries over there. We hired local people to build them and local teenagers to staff them, and probably made some kind of difference in the lives of some people. We definitely did not save anyone's life or change their life super drastically. But while we were there, like after working with an organization and getting fired, then the church and getting fired, and I say fired, they weren't paying us. We were volunteers. Like we had people back in the States that were supporting us financially. And then we worked also from Cambodia, like I wrote and edited and stuff. So yeah, now my view on all of that, and that changed while we were there. We stopped proselytizing to kids in the Bamboo Libraries. And I put a post on Facebook. People were furious about this, where I said to them, imagine that you take your child to story time at the library, and there is a Muslim teacher there that is telling your kids that this is the way, this is the truth, this is how you get to heaven. And then they lead them in a prayer so that they can convert to Islam. And that's essentially what we were doing in this Buddhist country, bringing these kids here, giving them snacks, giving them free books, playing games with them, and then telling them about our God and how they need to pray to our God and forsake their family's religion for our God. And when I would tell people that and make that comparison, they're like, well, but you had the truth. And the Muslim teaching at the library doesn't have the truth. So that's the difference. And you can't make someone understand that. How do you know what the truth is? Like, just because this is the religion you were born with, and you think that somehow, some way, of all of the millions and billions of people that live in the world, your religion, your denomination, your specific beliefs are the one true beliefs, and everyone else's are leading them down a path to hell. So we had stopped that already, and just continued with humanitarian work until we left in 2020. But I no longer believe in or support missions of any kind. And I'm very hesitant to support white people at all going over. What really bothers me is the money that is spent on a plane ticket and little suitcases full of toys and trinkets and what have you, and let's go change people's lives in Uganda or Cambodia or wherever. The money that I spent on a plane ticket to get there could feed them for years. You could just give money to the people that are already there. They can build their own wells. They can build their own houses. They can hold their own babies. They can do their own laundry. They can paint their own fences. There's nothing that they need from us except resources. So now I do have a family that we're really close to, a couple families that we still will send them money when they need it. Because people gave me money when I needed it. When my ex-husband left during a pandemic and left me in a new state with children who couldn't drive yet, and I wasn't making enough money, people stepped in and helped me. So I am not against giving to people in need. It's just the paying $2,500 for a plane ticket so that you can hand out 50-cent bowls of rice to people. It just doesn't compute. It's not fair. And I get very irritated when people tell the stories of what good they're doing over there. And I'm like, yeah, it's bullshit. It's not. Yeah. It's not.
Being a colonizer isn't cool anymore, guys.
Yeah, it's not. And so much damage has been done and continues to be done. And I just wish that it would stop and go away.
Just going back to the Muslim thing, they believe just as much as, Pentecostal or Catholic or Baptist believes that they know the way and the truth and the light. So do the Muslim people. They have the same basis for what I believe is true. And that's something that seems to get missed. Everybody's like, no, but ours is the truth. And it's like, yes, they feel the exact same way.
And they are very much more devout. So we lived in an apartment complex in 2014, the year before we moved to Cambodia, that was primarily Somali refugees and refugees from Eritrea and Nepal. But so most of our neighbors were Muslim. And it was very interesting that they looked at a lot of us as the ones that were the heathens, because we're not stopping to pray. We're not fasting for a month. We're not giving to the poor. We're dressing immodestly. We're like all of these things that we are doing, that they are faithfully adhering to what they believe is right. And we're just like, oh, we'll go to church on Sunday, but then we'll do whatever the heck we want. And we won't do this and that and that. We're the ones who are the Easter and Christmas Christians. We're the ones that say one thing at church and live another way. We're the ones drinking alcohol and not covering our head. Like all of the things that make them devout. We're not devout. I mean, sure, some people are. But there's a lot of hypocrisy too. And so the irony of us thinking that they are going to hell when they're actually following their religion so much more religiously than a lot of us did.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking about you talking about going over there in the white saviorism. I know you do a lot of reading and have a lot of interest in this, white supremacy and the effects, which is amazing, to not only be able to take responsibility for past beliefs, but to start in a new way and to start doing things in a different way, to like really own the impact that you're making in the world. I think it's really impressive. You're very much like into that. So how do you feel about that? Like the white saviorism and like this, I mean, for me, like when you talk about doing this mission work, it just feels like it's more to make the people who are doing it feel better than the people that they're doing it for.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, your kids get to go on this vacation and call it working for God, basically. And all the reading that you do, like, how do you see that playing out not only there, but like here in the United States?
Well, I write a lot about this in my poetry, where I grew up hearing about like unreached people groups in other countries and the lost and people who are oppressed, not even realizing the groups in the United States of America that were being oppressed by other people in the United States, and often by churches, and not getting the full truth of history, having it glossed over, whether it's Native American genocide or enslaving people from Africa. And then even when they were free, making at every single turn, making laws that prohibited them from getting ahead in any way. And this is all tied together. Like, we do not live in a very old country, and everything that happened was very, very recent. So you see videos of white people throwing rocks and screaming at Ruby Bridges, a little 6-year-old Black girl trying to go to school. And these people are still alive. Like, this is not ancient history. Slavery didn't even end that long ago. And so when I started realizing this is about, well, I mean, it started like a little before Trump. So my deconstruction had started. I had met more Black friends at my church. I'd started to read a little bit more. And as I was reading, I realized that my voracious reading in the past had been almost exclusively white authors. I can remember one book, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, that I read in 7th grade. It's by a Black woman, Mildred D. Taylor. And I honestly do not remember any other Black authors. It's possible there were one or two, but not any that I recall. So I made a commitment, I think it was 2017, that I was going to intentionally read Black authors and other authors of color. And in December of that year, I started a Bookstagram, just an Instagram account where you talk about books, called White Girl Learning. And the name was based on a book by Jacqueline Woodson, who's a queer Black woman. Her book, Brown Girl Dreaming. And so I just started reading books, started posting them. And then, so now it's been 6.5 years and I have not looked back. So all the books you see behind me on the bookshelves are books that I've read by authors of color. And I now, instead of me looking at myself as I have the answers and I'm the savior and I can go help people, it is, let's listen to these voices speaking the truth, speaking about all kinds of things. Like, some of them are speaking up against racism and white supremacy. Some of them are just writing really great novels. Some of them are telling the truth of history. Some of them are writing theology. But realizing what you miss out on when your default is reading white books. And I have people who get upset with me saying that, why are you specifically reading Black people's books? Like, I just read good books. I don't care what color the author is. And so I encourage people, go look at your bookshelves, look up the authors. Tell me how many of them are white. I'm going to make a guess that 96% of them are white. And so that's just what happens. And you aren't just picking good authors. You're conditioned to see this, and they're the ones getting the publishing deals, and they're the ones getting the dollars, and they're the ones getting the attention. You have to actively seek these other books out, and they are good books. Like, I'm catching up on things like Toni Morrison, Octavia Butler, Alice Walker, these Black women who have been writing for years and years and decades, but I didn't know about their writing. So for me now, the thing is just uplifting those voices, platforming those people. I don't do anti-racism education or any of that. I just read books by Black, Indigenous authors and then tell you about them. And then you go read them, you go follow them, you go pay them. And it's not just books on anti-racism either. And it really is like the time that I went snorkeling in Okinawa, Japan in 1997, and you put your face down in the water and your mind is blown. You cannot believe that there is this brilliantly colored coral and all these different colored fish and all of these, like, you don't see that when you look out at the ocean. Like, you have no idea. And here 75% of the earth is water. And all, like, this is the main deal. And then you've got the land. It's like, right. And especially if we've just lived in our tiny little corner. I think of that. I live in Columbia, South Carolina, where I moved during a pandemic, and I worked from home and didn't get out much. And even to this day, 4 years later, I will go to a new part of Colombia and feel like I'm in a different world. Like I didn't know this part was here. I didn't know. So you stay in your little town or your little city or your little state, and you have no concept of what's going on around you. Like me, I've never been to Hawaii. I have been to Okinawa, which is funny. The kids there for their senior trip took a trip to Hawaii because it was like not very far.
Yes, it's like California.
Yeah, which I thought was cool because I don't even remember where. I don't even think we took a senior trip.
Japan loves Hawaii. It's like
yeah.
But
and too, Karate Kid 2, I remember asking someone because I loved Karate Kid 2 when I forget when I watched it as a teenager maybe, and I'm like, where was Karate Kid 2 filmed? I want to know where on this little island it was filmed, and they were like, Hawaii. I said, no, wait a minute, what? But yeah, you live in Ohio for 39 years. You don't imagine trying to understand what it's like to live in Hawaii, like to be in until you go there. And if you don't go there, at least reading about it or watching it, or like watching nature documentaries. One of my kids loves animals and was obsessed with nature documentaries there for a while, probably still is, where you can just, cameras can go now where you can watch these mating dances of these tropical birds, like things you never knew were happening every single day. And we don't know. And so that's how I felt about starting to read literature that was written by people who were not white people that grew up in Midwestern United States. Yeah. It's a whole new world. And so you really, really are missing out, like not even mentioning the fact that you're not learning the truth about history. You're learning what the victors, right? They wrote the history. So you've got people saying that we came over here from Europe and we found this land and we claimed it because it's our God-given right, blah, 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 blah. And then you learn the truth. And history is connected to the present. There is no time ever when history broke off and then we started over.
Right.
And it's all connected, especially in the US with the Native American genocide and slavery is connected to this day. And that's another thing. Indigenous peoples in the United States, according to the history books, there used to be Native Americans and now there aren't. Something just happened. I don't know what happened. Well, there are Native Americans in every state in this whole country, on reservations, off of reservations, still trying to preserve some things that they once had and holding on as tightly as they can because the white people that came in just decimated it and didn't care. So yeah, it's been a really cool adventure / really hard thing to do. And it has been the best thing I've ever done. And I just try to bring other people along on that journey with me. You hear the word woke people don't like that word. And it's like, why would you not want to wake up? Like, why would you not want to wake up to truth? And let's say you learn something and you're like, I don't think that could really be true. Well, then examine it and see. But I was taught not to examine things. Like I was taught that that's dangerous. Why? Why could I not read that book and see if I think that it doesn't match up with?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
A conversation I had with some people in my family. I'm not going to get into specifics because I still love them. But I was just telling my niece, we were talking about abortion. This was a few years ago, and I was just kind of giving another perspective that there's more than one way to think about this. And I remember my family got really defensive and really upset. Don't tell her about that. And I'm like, no, she needs all of the information and then she can decide for herself. Yeah. We're not going to filter it. I've seen the results of that. But
well, you know why they don't want you to have all the information, right?
Right.
Because then you're going to use your brain. You're actually going to use your brain. It's same with, I have people that I love who still believe in young earth creationism, that the earth is just 6,000 years old because they believe the Bible says that. I'm like, do you know how many of your brain cells you have to shut off to believe that that is true, and not even realizing you don't have to believe that. You can still go to church and believe the Bible or love the Bible and also believe real true facts about science.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely it's science isn't scary. But I remember like learning that like I wasn't allowed to participate in Earth Day growing up because that was New Age. And so
Yeah.
on Earth Day at school, I would have to go sit in the library or do something
Oh
else while the
man.
other kids were doing activities because that was New Age. I mean, like really like me learning about how to take care of the planet is something that I needed to be sheltered from, but if you think from the like this control perspective, what I know personally from connecting to nature has been one of the most spiritual experiences of my life, being in communion
Yeah.
with nature, understanding that I'm not in dominion over it, but that we're in this together, that me and the earth
Right.
are in this together, has been so illuminating and opening and really increased my intuition and other things. And that's why they don't want us looking there, because that's where the power is. And that's, I was talking to Dr. Christina Cleveland about this. It's like the places where they're telling you not to look there. There's a reason they're telling you not to look there. They demonize Black women, but Black women have so much wisdom. I mean, those are the original mothers of humanity. Like they know stuff. Like look at the Black women. Don't look at trans people. These are our two spirits. These are the people that have like this divine masculine and feminine in their lives. Like they have so much. Look there. Talk to them. Ask them questions. If someone tells you not to look at something, please, for the love of God, let that be your reason to go and look at it. 100%.
You make a great point. That's exactly how I feel. That's how and it's scary at first. I remember Sarah Bessey's book, Jesus Feminist, that I read, I think in 2014. And I was like, oh, should I be reading a book with the word feminist on the front? And I thought, well, it's Jesus Feminist, so maybe it's okay. But thinking how much I had to untangle and unlearn before I could even allow myself to do this. So I get the cognitive dissonance. I get that people are terrified of this stuff, but that's where all the beauty is, all the wealth. And the nature. Here we've got God creating the world and calling it good. If you believe that, but yet you don't want anyone to to go listen to the trees because they might not like your preaching anymore, because like God might speak to them through God's creation, and literally opens up a whole entire new world in so many ways. And you realize how sheltered, how oppressed, how pushed down, how it's so sad. And a lot of people are very bitter and very angry about it with good reason. And that's why they're lashing out now, because wait, you lied to me. You didn't tell me this was out here. You told me that gay people were evil. You told me that Muslim people were evil. And what I encourage people to do, go talk to those people yourself. Go meet. That's what did it for me. Like having gay friends, having Black friends, meeting Muslim neighbors. And then you can't reconcile it because you're like, wait a second. This person is kind and fun, and I thought you said they were evil and mean and had an agenda and all of that. And it's easy if you put up those walls, and literal border walls and figurative walls, and don't let anyone get close to you, then it's easy to see them as of them, see them as other, see them as enemy. But when you break down those barriers and go to them or let them come to you, it's really impossible to hold those harsh beliefs and have all that fear.
Yeah. I understand the backlash too, because my inner teenager is real pissed off, especially now. Like I'm currently unpacking the damage that was done from the purity culture and just the way that it's caused me to view men, being raised my whole life to believe, that they hold this position over me and that all they care about is sex and like all this. So, there's so much to unpack there that I understand the anger. I understand the backlash. And I feel like it's also easy to fall back into that trap of othering.
Yeah.
So in this, like when I first started promoting the podcast, I have let out a little bit of like poking fun at the evangelicals that are freaking out about me starting this podcast. But I'm trying to keep it light, and I really have, am trying to keep it positive, because that's just more of the same oppression, is to other each other and to be like, that's us versus them. I feel like we've been tricked into that long enough, and I don't want to be a part of it. And I can see that that happening in some of the evangelical community. It's like sometimes being the opposite of what you don't want isn't the answer either, but like finding a middle ground in there that works for you somehow, or some, not even a middle ground, but a different place that works for you in general. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I do think there are phases that you have to go through. And I think anger is definitely there. And I think you also need to speak up against it. And for me now, I'm more likely to talk about the positive parts. So even I wrote a poetry trilogy, and it starts with a book called Unbelieve, where I'm personally unbelieving all of these things. And then Jaded is the second one. And that is my reckoning with the white evangelical Christian indoctrination. So that's where I'm like, get the bitterness out, get the anger out. I hate this, that. And then moving on, the third book that just came out, it's called Whole. And it's about reclaiming the pieces of myself and creating something new. And it's not a happy ending, because there's no ending, but it is really about, I'm going to focus on what I love now, what is good about things, celebrating. But it's both and, because I will still speak up against harm. I will still come on podcasts and talk about the things that happened in the past. It's not forgive and forget. It's what can we learn? And it's also helping other people who are still entrenched in that. And I was just talking to a friend this morning where I said that I don't think of my quote unquote mission field as evangelical Christians who are staunchly supporting Trump and hate everything woke and all of that. I'm not really concerning myself with them, but who I am concerned with are the people kind of in the middle who are starting to doubt, who are questioning. I have people from my old church from when I grew up randomly coming into my Instagram DMs, someone I barely even know, and saying, my daughter just came out as gay. I want to love her, but what about my church? I've seen some things you post. Can you help me? Like those kind of people, I want to be there for them, help them through. So yes, we're not all going to agree on how do we deconstruct, how do we decolonize. I try to bring in the whole white supremacy thing, because I do see that a lot, where people are deconstructing without understanding how it's still oppressive to Black people and other people of color. So I try to give grace to people, and I hate the word grace because it's so Christian-y and I don't know what other word to use. But we're all on a journey. We're all trying our best. And it's not so much I want to get along with everyone. I just want to give everyone an opportunity to try, to fail, to whatever. But I'm also not going to extend olive branches to people who are actively harming other people. That's why I'm not going to church. Would I ever go back to church? Possibly. I don't want to, because it's boring to me. I was always bored at church for 40 some years. But most importantly, I don't see my calling, and that's another Christian word, but I don't see my calling as like what people have asked me to do. Why don't you stay in the church and try to change it from the inside? I'm not worried about those people in there. I'm worried about the people out here that are being harmed. And I'm going to stand with them, because it feels too much like crossing a picket line or putting on the enemy uniform, where I have to convince people, oh, but I don't I'm not the bad kind of Christian. I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm just going to take off Christian altogether and say, I'm not a Christian. I am someone who loves you over here. And if these Christians try to harm you, I will stand in front of you. And if these are good Christians who are trying to help you, I will help them help you. But I'm not going to, I'm not going to put myself back in that position where I'm defending God instead of defending humans. Like, that's what the people who disowned me are doing. And I've heard people say, like, Joe Biden hurts God. And I'm like, how the hell is Joe Biden hurting God? How does anybody hurt God? You follow a God who cannot take care of himself. Like,
Right.
there's
omnipotent, but also very fragile.
Super duper fragile. Oh, so fragile.
Yeah, no, it's great because that's the thing for me. It's like, yes, I am here 100% for breaking down those beliefs, and when someone says something hateful, for breaking that down and not accepting it. And this space is also for people, I'm not trying to convert anybody that's never, but people are looking for something to listen to, just other ideas, there's no one message coming from here except that find your way back to yourself and you'll find your message. But one thing before, because I do want to talk about your books. I know we've been going, I could talk to you forever. But for me, it's important not to use shame, because shame is a result of trauma in our subconscious. Like, shame is trauma inducing. And I feel like that's what the church uses. And it's that internalized shame that keeps us from looking at our own part in this, like the white supremacy, and like you're saying, like reading all white people, like really not lifting up any voices or even participating in any voices of people of color. Like, if we go into a shame response of that, then it makes it a lot harder to look at than if you just bring it into the light. Like, there isn't any shame. We're just going to shine some light on it so we can really look at this. And that's where I want to come at it from. Just even recently, I've been kind of dealing with this, we're talking about Native Americans. I'm of Cherokee ancestry, and just for their own, for me to feel good about it, just in this conversation, I will point out to listeners that there were 60 million Native Americans killed in the Americas. There were 60 million people killed so that the missionaries could have this land that they considered theirs. 60 million. Back that long ago, that was a lot of people. There's still a lot of people,
Always a lot of people, yeah.
So there's shame in that, because I'm also of white ancestry. And we all have these parts of us that if we're ashamed to look at them, if we just feel like they're bad and wrong, then we'll never be able to see them properly and to evolve from it and to take the shame away from it and put it out there. I feel like that's what you're openly doing with your White Girl Learning, with the way that you speak about things. It's just I could be ashamed of this and hide about it, or I can just own it all, own my place in it, own my ancestors' place, and just own our place in it. And where can we move forward from here in a way that isn't harmful to other people?
And for me, I have 4 books out in the world that I wrote as a conservative Christian. So there's no hiding what I used to believe. These books, purity culture is just it's seeped in purity culture. I am reading them right now, which is painful, but I have things where I'm telling wives that they shouldn't wear shirts that are too tight. If the whole rubber band thing, if you does your shirt, if you press between your boobs, does your shirt bounce back, that maybe your shirt's too tight? Complete bullshit. Stuff that I was taught, that we owe it to our husbands, to protect them so they don't stumble and blah, 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 blah. I wrote that in a book. So it's there it is. There is my ignorance, my indoctrination, all of that. And I share that openly. And that's what I encourage people to do. And that's what you do. That's part of how shame gets dissolved or healed, is bringing it to light. That's what it is. And not that you have to say publicly every single thing you've ever done or thought or any of that. I love what you're saying. And that this is not about white guilt or whatever. This is, now that we know better, we do better. We can admit to what that was. We can do better. We can move forward, and we can make reparations, whatever that looks like. Whether it's actively fighting for land back, like giving land back to Native Americans that was taken from them, or I do what's called micro reparations. I didn't make this up, but helping Black friends who are starting bookshops. I go find the books, people sponsor the book boxes, I give them to them, they sell them and make the money. So they're not like, this is quote unquote free money for them. And it's a way that we can give back, that we can make things right going forward. We can't change anything that has already happened, not things that happened last year, not things that happened years before we were born. But we can make things right, make things better now. And I just encourage people to look for ways to do that and think of it, frame it in that way, instead of I'm ashamed, I feel guilty, I have to pay a debt. No, just I'm going to make things right and make things better as I move forward and from here on out.
And you have, like, that's one thing I really love, and I talk a lot about, is alchemy, like alchemizing our emotions, alchemizing our energy, like however you look at it. And you've done that. You've like taken that shame and alchemized it into something wonderful, which is your poetry. And I would love to like talk a little bit about that. I know we've been going for a minute, but if you don't mind, if we can talk some about your books, because I just feel like it's so approachable. It's actually just inspired me to start, putting more words into poetry. And
good.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I love it when people tell me that I inspired them to write poetry. And I think the key there is that my poetry is accessible. It's not over anyone's head. It's pretty straightforward. And on the one hand, you could also call it not really very smart poetry. Like there's nothing really to unlock or to figure out or to decode. But and the way that it happened, I would have called this a God thing before. I don't know what I call it now, but I have a poem about not knowing what to say when I think of a God thing. But I was writing prose. I've been writing prose forever. I haven't written poems since first grade. And somehow, and I can't even actually explain it besides it being kind of magical. My deconstruction memoir that I've been trying to write for 5 or 6 years, I decided to break it up into little bite-sized poems. Some of them are 2 or 3 short little lines, like haiku style. Some of them are a page. But I told less of the story, like used less words to get more across. And then somehow it just spiraled into this really cool thing where that's what I do now. And then I started creating poem art where I would cut up, I have some messed up versions of my book when I self-published at the beginning. And so I started ripping out pages, cutting up the poems, putting them on illustrations like Frog and Toad, Winnie the Pooh, Strawberry Shortcake, books that I buy at thrift stores for 50 cents, books from my childhood, and matching the poems to the illustrations. And then other people saying, oh, I can do that too. I self-published a book that's called Please Cut Up My Poems, where you can specifically just do that and do like this poem art therapy. None of this is something that people cannot do. You can take a Facebook post that you wrote and chop it up into little lines, and there is your poem. You can print it out, cut it up, put it on an illustration, and there is your poem art. Anyone can do this. And so I am just every day filled up, like overflowing with excitement for this, like how simple it is, but how profound that people are sending me their poems. My next project is another Cut Up My Poems book, but it's going to be specifically like therapy for people who've been through divorce and infidelity. So all the poems are about divorce, and you can, I got this idea the other day that I'm going to take some old wedding photos and put the poems on top of the wedding photos maybe rip off the ex, maybe not. We'll see what I do with him. It's just different ways that you can easily, positively heal from things. And that's what my poetry has been for me, to heal through this deconstruction, what it's been for other people. And I feel like there's some momentum now with the third book that came out. People are a little scared of the first one. It's called Unbelieve. It's got the word heretic in the subtitle. Then Jaded is like, ooh, white evangelical Christian indoctrination. That's kind of scary, right? And then Whole, it's got this, like, it's a rainbowy cover and it looks really pretty and it doesn't look scary at all. I just had a friend tell me her 72-year-old mom read Unbelieve, which I was very tickled by. Anytime my friends, 70-year-old moms, read my books, I get excited. She read Unbelieve. Then she heard that Jaded was the bitchy little sister and she was scared to read it. So she never read it. Whole came out. He read Whole like a couple of weeks ago and then told her daughter, my friend, I feel like I can read Jaded now because Whole, it turned out okay. It was not scary. And I can go back now and read the middle. And people will tell me that they read it like as a daily devotional, which is funny because I read daily devotionals for years. And now I'm realizing as I read more and more and more books, I used to think the Bible was this magical book that every time you read it, you got something new out of it. Well, I have books now on my shelf by Black women that I'll read 3 and 4 times. And I also get something new out of it every time because why? I'm a different person when I read it. So people are telling me about that about my poems. For my launch team for Whole, we did this. I don't know if you're familiar with the book the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Yes, yeah.
And so we did Siblinghood of the Traveling Poems, and I sent a book to the first person on the list, and they put art and illustrations and commentary on like 10 to 20 of the poems. And then they send it on to the next person and that person does it. And then the next person. And then when it gets back to me, hopefully it's going to be just filled with everybody's what they want to say, what they want to art. And yeah, so just all of these things that have come about that have created community. I had a woman say that her daughter was so artistic and she doesn't have an artistic bone in her body, but she started doing poem art. She's like, finally, there's art that I can do. Like, I feel like I'm making art. One of my friends is writing a musical about one of my books.
That's amazing.
And so being able to inspire and encourage people is something I have always wanted to do, but it used to be, let me inspire and encourage you to be the best wife that you can possibly be the unselfish wife that your husband deserves, and things like that. So I've channeled that energy and love into what I feel is a much healthier and more positive direction. But I tie in all of those things that I care about, which is fighting white supremacy, anti-racism, writing poems to my queer siblings. And we just opened just on Sunday, a couple days ago, a new queer bookstore in my city, the very first one ever. And I got to be part of that. And it's just, there's so much love that I have in my heart that I want to spread around, and I get to do it with words. Whereas before I would volunteer in the church nursery and different things that I absolutely hated. And now to be able to do this, like help friends who are starting bookstores and who have written books and do micro reparations and all of this, and it's stuff I love, is wild to me. And so I just want other people to know that too, that you can give back in a way that also fills you up. And that's actually the best way to give back because it's sustainable and it's joyful. And if you believe in God, then that's what I believe God created us to do, is to be who we are and to give out of that. And so many of my friends were told, you can't be who you are. Like, you have to assimilate. You can't bring your Blackness into this white church. You can't bring your queerness into this church. You can't be a Muslim and come to our church. Like, all of these things that you cannot be to fit into this box. That's yeah, that's gone now. Like we're ripping apart these boxes and making poem art out of them.
I love it. That's alchemy, right? Taking something that's
Yeah.
painful and difficult and turning it into something beautiful. It's really great. I'm gonna take a pause because my brain kind of stopped. There was something I wanted to point out in the conversation. Sorry, I just need a second to gather what I was gonna say. I'm just completely lost. I was too busy listening and enjoying what you were saying.
That happens to me far too often. And usually I will take some kind of notes to try to do it. But yeah, it's still.
Yeah. But it's funny because you were talking about like just you're sharing all this love and joy and spreading all this joy. And that's like what we were taught that we were doing when we were really spreading like
yes.
And not love and joy, but it's interesting how when you really find your own authenticity, you get back to that self, and the natural byproduct is those things that Jesus encouraged us to do, right? I think that's pretty. So you were talking about your poem about God. I think that's really interesting because I have here, I bounce back and forth between words because for me, it's all just like fluid anyway. But, God is recognizable by people, but also offensive to some people. And, sometimes I'll say source or love or creator or just source energy, whatever feels appropriate in that moment. So do you happen to have that poem available? I would love to hear it.
Oh, the one about, let's see. I don't know where any of my poems are. This is a running joke with me where well, the one called It's a God Thing, but that's not about my name for God. I do have one. I actually just made some poem art. One second, if I can find that. Okay, this one is called God or Whatever. I have friends who talk about God, being there for them, lifting them up, keeping them going. And something is doing that for me too. I just call it by other names, like hope and love, and sometimes the universe, and some really beautiful friends. So I don't have a thing. Another one, this is called Pure Unadulterated Love. Chatting with friends who are done with Christianity, chatting with theologians whose God I could get behind, chatting with friends who have never believed in God. It's wild how unconditionally I can truly love people now that I have no designs on their eternal souls.
Oh, that's so good. I just chills all over.
So I will say, when I'm desperate, like happened in our family recently, that I won't go into, but where I am just like, I need some wisdom. I need some help. And I'm like, Mama God, please. Like, I'll just say that I don't know what I believe. It's just a little bit of it is habit, but another part is a person who can figure things out. This one is beyond me. I need something beyond me, like somewhere. And generally speaking, like I have a friend who's a pastor, and his idea of God, he said, I don't even see God as happening apart from people showing up for each other. So it's like God is not separate. God, because big problem with people giving God all the credit for something that a surgeon did or that someone else did. And you're like, hold up. Giving God credit for the team winning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second there, but yeah.
Okay. Even a coach giving God credit for their football team winning. And you're like, maybe it was the quarterback.
Yeah, totally.
But I just, there are times when I'm like, Mama God, help me, because I cannot figure this out. But that's the closest I have gotten lately to calling on God.
Yeah. I've had loved ones that have said that, like, I'm like, you're doing amazing. You're such, you're really just showing up in such a beautiful way. And I like to tell people they're a good person. I think we're all good inside, but just like, you're really showing up in a beautiful way and all of this. And it's always, oh, it's not me, it's God. And I'm like, actually, no, because we all have God and not everybody makes those choices.
Exactly.
So no, it's you. Give yourself a little credit. Even the Bible will say that. Give credit where credit's due, right?
Yeah.
Like give yourself some credit for the good that you're doing in the world because you deserve that. Like that's part of what keeps us going.
And I'm tired of God getting all the credit and none of the blame. That's what I talk about a lot in my poems.
Yes.
I have a friend I wrote, I hope she doesn't read this poem. If she does, oh well. I don't mention her name, but she had like these digestive issues for 10 years. And then she finally found this diet that is finally taking away the pain. And she gets on Facebook and it's like, all praise and glory to God, all praise and glory to God. And I'm like, so God held out on you for like a whole ass decade. And now God gets the credit for this. Like that to me is so gross. I hate that kind of stuff these days because God did not get blamed for those whole 10 years when God did not tell you what the problem was. And
right.
now God gets the
it.
credit. And I'm sure that this thing that you discovered was either you doing research for 10 years or someone else that did research or some other kind of thing. Same with a hurricane, like praying that God moves the hurricane out of the path of your home. Well, then it moves it into the path of somebody else's. Like there's no, yeah, I could stop there with that.
I love it. No, it's true. It's true. And I remember what I wanted to say before was you say that they're not smart poems, but I would like to offer that maybe it's the smartest way to go about it, considering that the people who are reading them have spent their whole life deciphering like convoluted words, trying to like interpret something that's just written in Shakespeare times and that contradicts itself and over, but you've made it very simple and clear. And from my perspective, that's the smartest thing you could do for people who need a break from that.
Yeah. And I will also say that some of my poems are very, very conventionally smart as well. Like they are, I put a twist at the end, or I do this, or I use these words in a certain way. I will take full credit for getting better and better at writing really smart poems. What I meant by that was there are some that are literally just a Facebook post or something that I rearrange the words and here they are. Like I have people coming to me now and sending me all these poems. They're like, I didn't know I could write poems. And I'm telling them it's because your definition of a poem is too strict. It's too in a box. A poem can be whatever you you want it to be. If you can write at all, you can write a poem. So they are accessible. You will have to work on it if you want to make some of them as good as mine, right? But
they are, like, put them into books.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, anyone can do this, and yeah, it's just really liberating and healing and fun and all of that.
For everybody listening, I'm going to have all of your books and everything linked in the description, so you can find Marla very easily there, and both of her Instagram pages to find her on. And I want to ask you for two things before we go.
All right.
I have so much value. I'm sorry. I'm going to take as much. I'm not sorry. Not sorry. I'm going to take as much of it as I can. For one, for people who are deconstructing, for people who are questioning, or just trying to start over, what piece of advice would you give?
I will say that for being on the other side of it, and not that there's like a wall and you're totally on the other side, but that it is scary. It is hard, but you can get through it. And there is something really, really beautiful on the other side. I have a poem, a couple poems, but about my ex in evangelical Christianity and how people said to me, even right when he left, you're going to be so much better off without him. It's going to be so great. I hear you. I hear that. And thank you. But it was also hell to get through that for a few years until I got to where I am now. And same with leaving Christianity. Now it is this most beautiful place. I could never, ever, ever, ever go back to what it was like, even if there was comfort and all of that, never go back. But that journey to get here was hell. And so for me to say to people, hey, look what's over here. I am saying that because here I am, and look what's over here. And I'm on the other side of a lot of things, divorce, infidelity, a lot of different things that I have made it to the other side of. But I will never tell someone that it is easy or painless or no problem, or you don't need any kind of therapy, or you're fine. Never. So I think that is actually being realistic about that is also encouraging, because you can do it. You can do it. It will be hard. You can do it. And it's worth it. Yeah. And once you start to wake up to things, you can't really go back anyway, because you know better and you won't be able to live with yourself, and that's going to suck. So you really don't have any choice. It's kind of like when you're getting ready to have a baby, the baby starts coming out. You can't put it back. Like, it's coming out.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Hurt.
It really is like that.
It's gonna hurt. But when it comes out,
you're gonna love it. We'll just say
it's gonna be okay. Like, you are going to be able to do it. So that's the encouragement that I would give.
Like, both things are hard. Coming out of it's hard, but staying in it is harder. Like, choose which hard you're gonna do. A lifetime of hard, or a short period of hard.
And it's a different kind of hard too. It becomes a hard that you can't morally reconcile. And so you can't do that. You got to choose the hard that you can live with. And it's like leaving an abusive relationship, or if your kids are being abused or something, getting out of it's going to be hard, but watching your kids be abused, or you being abused, is a different kind of hard. And that's not a tenable kind of hard. Like, you've got to choose the other hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And looking away is only just taking us further and further from our soul, from our truest self. Okay. So to leave us, would you please read us your poem? Which one you feel best about, like, leaving us with today? Would you read us another poem?
Oh gosh.
I would say your favorite, but I can imagine it would be hard to pick a favorite when you have.
No, there's no favorite. I am actually going to go to the first book and do one kind of toward the end. So Unbelieve is the first one. And it's called Where Have I Landed? Because I get this question a lot. Like, people want to know where I've landed. Where have I landed? Where have I landed? That's the thing. I can fly now, and damn, what a glorious view. You can see so much from up here. Wow. And dang, there are other birds too. I might descend, a light from time to time, but why would I land in any one place for very long at all when I have wings? I've always, always had wings. And so, I won't say anything about it. I'll just leave it with that.
Beautiful. I got chills. Yeah. I love it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for doing this a second time. I think it's even better this time. It is. This is the way it was meant to be. I remember bits, but I'm just going to know that this was the way it was meant to be. And
perfect.
Thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, Marla.
Aloha. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, share your thoughts by leaving a 5-star review. It really helps more people to find this space. Want to go deeper? Head over to my website at leavingthechurchtoFindGod.com. There, you can make a donation and make sure that we continue to have these conversations. No matter where you are on your spiritual journey, if you or someone you know would like to join the podcast and tell your story, please reach out to me on Instagram at AuthenticallyMelly. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep finding your own unique connection to something greater. Until next time, stay authentic, stay open, and aloha.